In this video, we'll be creating the force field. The first thing we want to do is go into first person BP, blueprints, and right click and select blueprint class. We want this blueprint to be an actor, and we will name it BP force field. Double click to open it. We'll add a component. We'll just add a sphere. We need to do a few things with this sphere. The first thing we want to do is we want to set the collision properties to overlap all. The second thing we want to do is down here at the bottom where it says can ever affect navigation. We want to uncheck that. If that stays checked, then rather than running straight at you and crashing into the force field as a result, they'll try and find a way to you that goes around the force field, which is not what we want. Also, on physics, uncheck enable gravity. Now let's go over to the event graph here. Let's start by giving our shield some amount of health. So click on variables and name this one health. And it will be an integer. Whenever the bots run into the shield, whenever the bots run into the force field will lose health. Once the force field gets to 0 health, it will be destroyed. Compile and set your default health to whatever you want to. I'm going to set mine to 100 because why not? It's a nice number. So now we'll go into our BPAI blueprint, content, third person blueprint, blueprints, and BPAI. And what we'll do now is in our actor begin overlap event, I'm going to drag these down to give myself a bit of room. In our actor begin overlap event, right here at the very start, we check to see if the thing that we're overlapping is a first person projectile. If it is, the game continues along this path, but if it's not, the game will continue this way. So we're going to drag off of cast failed and type in cast to BP force field, and connect other actor to object. So now if our AI overlaps something that's not a first-person projectile, it will immediately try to see if what it's overlapping is a force field instead. If it is a force field, the first thing we want to do is damage the force field. So let's give the robot an extra variable, and we'll call it power. And we will set that to an integer. Power is the amount of damage the robot is going to deal when it runs into the robot. Or into the force field, excuse me. We'll drag off of BP force field and type in set health. And connect this top arrow here to set. We'll drag off of BP force field and type get health. Drag off of the green here and hit minus and go to integer minus integer. And plug power into B. Then we'll plug the answer here into health. So now what's happening is whenever the BPAI determines that it's overlapping the force field, it's going to change the force field's health to whatever its health was minus the robot's power. So the higher power is, the faster the force field gets destroyed. So once we've done that, we want to check to see if the force field has any health left. So we'll drag off of this arrow here and type if and click branch. Drag off of the green here. This is the new value of health. If you were to just drag in health, it would work just as well. If you were just to drag in health there, that would work just as well, but I'm just going to use this just because it's already there. So we'll drag off of that and type in less than sign and click integer less than equals integer. We'll keep that set to 0 and drag red into red. The reason we're using less than equal to instead of just less than is because this block is checking to see if our health is less than or equal to 0. And we want to destroy the force field if the health equals exactly 0. So what we're going to do is drag off of true, and we're going to type in die. Explodes will be off, and the object will be as BP force field. So if our force field has run out of health, we will destroy the force field. The next thing we want to do is, regardless of whether or not our force field runs out of health, we want to destroy the robot. So drag off of die and type die. We want explodes to be on this time, and the object will be self. And we want to drag false into this second die. That way, if our force field is out of health, we destroy the force field, then destroy the robot. If it's not out of health, we just skip destroying the force field and get straight to destroying the robot. Since we've destroyed a robot, now we have to decrement bots remaining. So drag in GM and click get. Drag off of the blue and type get bots remaining. Drag off of the green and type minus minus. Connect these arrows, connect die to minus minus. Click compile. Make sure you've compiled and saved everything. And now the force field should work. Let's see here. I'll throw it into the center of the game, and what you'll notice immediately is that it's very, very small. The reason I left it like this is so that we can have different sized force fields. Because we're not restricted to just one force field in the game. We can have multiple force fields, and we can have different size force fields. So I've started my player inside the game, and you can, or inside the force field, excuse me. And you can see that as the robots run into it, they get destroyed. And you can see that even though the robots are being destroyed, only 3 are ever spawning in at a time. The reason for that is because I'm not the one destroying them. They're only getting destroyed because they're running into the force field. Now, there are 2 things going on right now that you should be aware of. Firstly, no matter how many bots run into my force field, they will not destroy my force field right now. The reason for that is because I just left power set to 0. The second thing, which is much more alarming, is that when you take a shot from inside the force field, the shot doesn't spawn in front of you, it spawns on top of the force field. So let's fix that. Double click on first person projectile, click the collision component, and go down to collision. Set the collision on world static to overlap. Compile, and now our gun works normally. The reason this was happening was that even though the BP force field was overlapping the first person projectile, the first person projectile was not overlapping the BP force field. The projectile was set to block the force field. So while the force field overlapped the projectile was treating the force field as a solid object. And since you can't be where a solid object is, the shot was spawning from the closest point, which was on top of the force field. The reason we had to set this to world static is because the BP force field is a world static object. Now, to fix the fact that the shield is basically indestructible, all we do is just change power. I'll change it to 5. And now what you'll notice is that I gotta take that out. You can't see that, can you? Sure can't. Alright, now that 20 of them have hit the force field is out of health. So now they're coming straight at me. Now, one thing that might somewhat annoy you is the fact that the force field is invisible from the inside. So it's really difficult to tell whether or not you're actually inside the force field. In the next video, we will fix that.